Tiny phone people, welcome to spring in the United Kingdom. It's cold, damp, and an overwhelming 8 degrees today. I suppose this explains why an indoor jungle allows me to potter all year round, whereas the outdoor one, well, not when it's cold. Right, come on then, let's go and potter around in the jungle. Now, pottering around isn't just doing. Probably about 50% is looking and watching, observing, reveling, until I get told off and asked to clean a room in the house. On an average day, a good 45 minutes to an hour is spent looking at this. What you're looking at here is actually my first ever paludarium. Paludariums allow us to have a water and land base. There are many things that I'd change about this setup, mainly to do with the sponge filters at the bottom and earth being constantly wet. However, for now, I'm happy with the overall appeal and my first attempt. No mold has arrived so far, and the smell of it is earthy and fresh as ever. So for now, we'll plod on and continue to find out what happens in this small realm of magic that I've created. I then have a little open and check of this terrarium here that I made recently at one of Ben's terrarium workshops at St. Peter's Garden Centre, Worcester. Not my finest, but still, I believe a lot better than anybody else's on the day. Next to those two bad boys, we've got this incredible creation of mine that's now been going strong for, I'd say, probably nearly a year. Inside we've got 2 newts and 5 poison dart frogs, also known as dendrobats. In their natural habitat, they are poisonous because of the poisonous insects that they eat. But thankfully, in this environment, where I feed them flightless fruit flies, no poison is secreted through their pores. I also recently received some incredible plant mail from Rip, my dear friends over in the Netherlands. And this absolute beauty is one of the new plants. I'm not going to attempt to pronunciate the name of this until I practice it a few times, but I will write it down in the description. These plants grow out the side of pots and actually have an extremely clay, gritty substrate like this. Flowers grow out of this vertebrae that follows the plant's leaves downwards. I am exceedingly excited to see what these look like. Before we move on to some pottering in the true jungle, some of you might have noticed my collection of fugglers. Strange, I expected more from adulthood, but here we are. I almost forgot. Also in the dining room is my absolutely beautiful Dieffenbachia, which has been struggling with mealybugs for a year now. I say struggling, it's not struggling at all. They're there, I see them and squish them, and they come back again. But all in all, I think he's fucking happy. Next to this large window, and with 136 water Sansi bulb, I believe thriving could possibly be the right word. Come on, I'm over here now. Judging from these wilting leaves, the pothos vines definitely need, they definitely need a bit of a water. I am a chronic underwaterer. Sometimes I don't water my plants for up to a month and they still survive. I do feel Monstera, Rhaphidophora, Philodendrons are a lot hardier than other plants and actually do better being underwatered than overwatered. Right, let's have a little look at this to show you what I'm talking about without breaking anything. That is absolutely bone dry. And let's have a look at the plant. I mean, it looks absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. So, do not water on a schedule. Do not water on a bloody schedule. So now that you've seen how dry these plants can get without dying, here comes my first rant. Watering on a schedule. No, never. Those people that put little tags or tickets in the pot telling you indirect sun, water once a week, how do you know? How do you know the humidity in my house? How do you know the soil mix that I've made? How do you know the size of the pot that I've put it in? How do you know how often I put my central heating on? How do you know how close I am to a window? How do you know how much light my plant is getting? I think you understand now. If you see that, stray away from the seller, stray away from the people. They're talking bullshit. They're making you consume the plant, kill the plant, and therefore have to go back for more. Underwatering is better than overwatering with philodendrons, monstera, rhaphidophora, syngoniums. They are more tolerant to drought than you'll ever imagine. And they'll let you know when they're thirsty. They'll look a bit fanned out, they'll look a bit faded, they might be a bit limp, a leaf might start to curl a bit. As long as that leaf is not brown and dead or too yellow, it will come back. You can tell it's quite a passionate subject of mine. If people tell you when to water your plant, they're talking shit. Only you can know. Stick your finger into the soil all the way in, be cheeky. Want to use two, use two. Pull it out, and if there's nothing on your fingers, then water the plant. Soak the plant, let it drain through completely and put it back again. But if there is mud, soil, substrate on those fingers, leave your plant be. You know what I'm loving about YouTube? This ability to just ramble, to brain fart, to not prepare something to make it 60 seconds long and try and condense it all in. I can ramble for ages and hopefully you'll tag along. Anyway, next up on my exciting pottering mission is here. I am looking at a variegated, in some places not so variegated, burl marks, whatever flicks your switch. Now, a burl marks, along with lots of variegated plants, is actually chimeric variegation. There we go, throwing some big words at you today, but never fear because my explanations will bring it down to layman terms. Chimeric variegation means an unstable variegation. Your plant's color can revert to 100% green. A good example of this is here, where the variegation has continued, and here, where the variegation has ceased, and it is producing all green leaves. Rantish number 2. With chimeric or unstable variegated plants, giving them more light will not allow variegation to return. Giving it more light generally than a non-variegated plant will overall help the plant to sustain its variegation, but it will not bring it back. The only way to deal with this reverted section, if you wish to, is to chop the stem all the way back to where it gave variegated leaves lower down the plant. But for this plant, until it reaches the top of this pole, I shall leave him be. This is a form of leaf that I absolutely love and adore, sort of oakish leaf shape, and it grows gigantic. Anyway, this plant is under attack. It's been attacked by spider mite. Are they spiders? Probably not. Are they mites? Yes. Now these webbing wankers take over each leaf by webbing the entire back and sometimes front of it. Unless you have a keen eye, sometimes it's hard to see. However, here it's very obvious, so come and take a look at this. All of these tiny mites are slowly draining all of the goodness out of these leaves. A good telltale sign for spider mite is the yellowing and dry patches on the leaves like this. It can also be an indication of other pests. So, what am I going to do? I'm going to go to the kitchen and get a cloth. I will continue to wipe down all of these leaves, then mix up a bit of dish soap with water and spray the leaves down. The reason for me doing this is because all over my jungle I have added predator mites, other insects that eat the bad ones. Here, however, they haven't been doing a good job. If I use neem oil mixed with horticultural soap, which is also magnificent, I will kill all of the good bugs as well as the bad bugs. Also, here's a little tip for you. Neem oil has to be ingested into the plant. So spraying your plants with neem oil immediately might not kill the pests. In fact, the plant ingests the neem oil through its pores, and once it's circulating around the plant's system, then when the bug bites the plant, it's poisoned alive. And as for chemical warfare, I have used it before, but I try not to. I've moved things around recently, and some of my taller plants have now moved into this area of the house. I do feel to take a lifestyle to a whole new biophilic level, using your house to grow the plants is the next step. Poles were great to begin with, sticks then take over, but there's nothing like a solid oak beam. Around the entire house, you'll find plants that attach themselves to my walls. This, for me, is living in a true jungle. My begonia maculata often brings the boys to the yard, and was actually a gift from an old friend, Ben, over at Worcester Terrariums. I received it a few years ago. It was only about this big, and I realized over time that the more that I chopped plants, the quicker and thicker they grew back. After a year and a half of continuous trimming and propagating, when I found that the stems had thickened and doubled or tripled in number, I unleashed the begonia into this part of my house. Over winter, the begonia took quite a bit of a hit, and therefore I'll be propagating a lot of the dry leafless branches. This will also stimulate new growth, bringing her back to life and giving her a thicker, fuller feel. Before pottering upstairs, I want to talk about this plant here. This Anthurium doesn't need high humidity and produces the most gigantic of leaves. Like with all Anthuriums, they produce flowers when happy, but these flowers don't resemble the flowers that we buy for the missus. These resemble a very small, odd-shaped and bent penis. The flower is also known as an inflorescence, and is able to have both female and male parts. In fact, it starts off with the gooey substances that are secreted from the pores of the flower, this being the female receptive stage, and then develops this pollen over the top, which can be stored in a freezer and rubbed onto the female stage of the flower to pollinate and achieve seeds. Come on then, let's go potter around upstairs. Jose over here actually dates back to about 2.5 years ago, and was about 60 centimeters high. He now stands at a whopping 14 foot tall, and I just can't bring myself to cutting him. In fact, I'll be letting him reach another 6 foot before I chop anything. Not sure if you can see me from here, but this part of the wall houses some madrigal numbers. One of my favorite plants at the moment is the one up here with the long strap leaves. This is the Anthurium patricia, and is another Anthurium that does not need high humidity to grow and thrive. However, like most plants, the more humidity, the better and quicker the growth. Because of my gigantic bird of paradise, you can't really see the wall behind. However, if I do that, you might be able to. This is my living wall. Now, the wall behind me consists of multiple plants, but this massive one here is called a Perisio verde. There are actually 2 plants in here together, and once again I bought them as 60 centimeter babies. Now, the Perisio is a very interesting plant. Its variegation is actually controlled by heat. The cooler the climate, the greener the leaves. Warmer the climate, the more mottled the leaf is. And this plant is a marvelous example of seasonal variegation. During the summer, warmer months, the plant variegates, and during winter it goes all green. It does need a bit of a chop at the top here. It's getting a little bit too tall. I thought you'd get a little different view of the wall here. What's incredible is this plant that I had as a tiny, teeny baby. In fact, some of its first leaves are here at the bottom, dying. The leaves are not fenestrated at all to begin with, as you can tell from this. As it grows upwards and you give it support, the leaves start to fenestrate. And now look at these leaves. These top leaves are gigantic and completely fenestrated. This, my friends, is the magic of plants. Your plant's physical appearance can change dramatically over time. As it matures, plants take forms unknown to begin with. This corridor of the house I call Syngonium Alley. I have all sorts of different species that grow up the walls. From Baltic to gooses to mojitos to albos to confetti eyes to 3 kings. pandas and more. Going back to maturing plants, let's take a look at what happens with syngoniums. Here we are looking at a syngonium mojito, a mottled syngonium, and one can see the small tri-leaves start off like this, or even smaller. As the plant matures, its lobes grow bigger and bigger. Here's a spiffing example of already how change can happen. And as it evolves, more lobes appear. In fact, here you can see that the 3-lobed plant has now become 5. Syngoniums are also chimerically variegated, meaning they can lose variegation. And hopefully, as noted down earlier, if they go all green, you chop back to the stem of where the last variegated leaf was. Right, I'll do the watering in a bit. Let's have a quick look at the greenhouse and see what we've got to do in here. It's absolutely boiling, so I'm going to stay in here for a minimum amount of time. The greenhouse houses probably near to 800 plants and also contains my most prized possessions. One of which is this rather delicious mint monstera. As you can tell at the moment, I'm air layering it, a way to propagate that will ensure 100% success. I do have a video on that, very short one, however I will be making a longer form one soon. Now there were a lot of pests in here at one time, but I spent £75 on biological warfare, and now things are looking good again. This Queen Anthurium is actually absolutely gigantic. I think that's nearly a metre long. It's ridiculous, it's incredible. Over here, apart from the SP Columbian over here, are propagations. These massive big Gloriosum and McDowell leaves here were taken from my mother plant. Now what you don't know is later on in June, to be specific, June the 23rd, it's a Sunday, I'll be opening up my house with the family for visits and plant sales. And all of these big leaf wonders are actually propagations of the mothers that I have downstairs. So if you are around in the UK on June the 23rd, 2024, save the date, come and enjoy reggae music, brownies, teas, coffees, even some cocktails, and of course, my green friends. Got some nicely variegated plants over here, some lovely variegated Adansonii, the pinnatum, the variegated form, I feel that's absolutely spiffing. A Monstera frozen Adansonii, frozen freckles down here, not many people have those, they're beautiful. I think that's the mint form, or the Indonesian mint form, lovely and big there. Beautiful. I never liked Hoyas, but recently I've started getting into them. This absolutely beautiful Veitchii. I've actually got a tiny tiddler over here, just pushing out a new leaf here, this little baby. I don't like to touch Anthurium leaves too much, because I am a believer that when you touch them and they're just emerging, like this Pappy cross leaf here, it's not good to touch. That's how you get little indentations, blemishes and rips. If they're coming out, do not fondle them. They'll be okay. There's nothing better than freely spraying. Can't do this in the house, but I can in here. And it's so much easier to look after things this way, I tell you. Beautiful tortum in the corner over there. Some furry petioles. Some fuzzy petioles. Really my prize Anthuriums down here. Glad hands. I haven't spoken about glad hands. Now, not many people have these plants, and they're not expensive or excessively expensive. However, just look at this leaf. Just look at that. It is absolutely stunning, and if that doesn't give Jungle is Massive vibes, I don't know what does. Speaking of Jungle is Massive, can we take a second to appreciate the size of my Jopii leaves? This is the latest one, slightly yellow. I've told him off. However, let's look at this one. What has happened here? It is not a variegated Jopii originally, but what it seems to have done is produce some sport variegation. For those of you that don't know, sport variegation is random variegation that appears on a plant that is originally not variegated. As I mentioned, this is variegated, this leaf here, and underneath, the leaf underneath is also variegated. So when I do come one day to propagating this absolute animal, I'll be cutting the nodes that are variegated with these 2 leaves in an attempt to sustain this freak sport variegation. And if I do, I'll be an extremely happy bunny. Okay, it's too hot. I'm leaving. I'm putting the fan back on and we're off. Right, as far as gentle pottering goes, I'm pretty satisfied with that. Now I'm going to go and wipe down some leaves and water some plants. But as I feel that might bore you, I shall be putting these on instead and prancing about the house to my heart's content. In fact, if any of you do like getting motivated to music, you might like my free Spotify playlist, the Plant Care playlist. I shall link that also into the description below. The only thing left for me to say now is until the next time, one love time.